Hello, my name is Chris Gorse. I'm the director of the Leeds Sustainability Institute. Thinking about some of the issues of supply and demand in the energy sector, things are changing. What are just some of the key points that we have to consider when we're trying to tackle this problem? Because it is a changing environment. Anne?
Well, we're now looking at a situation where we need to understand particularly energy demand and the patterns of energy demand, and also to understand how we can influence that so that we can change it to fit better with supply if we need to, thus reducing wasted energy. So that's an energy efficiency matter to some extent. And we're looking at, on the supply side, a lot of different factors from the ones we've had before. We're no longer looking purely at large power stations that are brought online, perhaps not very quickly, and it's a question of predicting future energy use quite far ahead. We're looking at a whole mix of different kinds of energy production, from micro renewables right up to coal, gas power stations, nuclear, and so on. So it's all very complex.
I think that's an interesting point. You're talking about the different mix of energy in the country. I think it's quite difficult for the consumer to really understand what constitutes a kilowatt of energy, whether it's coming from coal or coming from renewables. And we're at a time really where that's becoming more prominent in people's minds. There's a lot of press about different types of technologies and renewables, and we're going over the next few decades to be in a position where the ratios are going to start changing. So there's implications there in terms of understanding, people's understanding of what energy actually means.
And you're absolutely right that it's all about ratios and the nature of the mix, and a mix it has to be, because there's a lot of talk about the intermittency of renewables and the rather large, shall we say, the difficulties of bringing larger power stations online very quickly. So there are different problems with different types of energy supply. So if you have a mix and you are able to manage that mix intelligently, then that's obviously an advantage.
We can see that the government are going to be decarbonising some of our power supply using nuclear. What's the characteristic of nuclear power? How is that going to feed in, and how's that different to power stations?
Well, one of the advantages, I suppose, that the government are trying to get at there is that nuclear is going to be a base load supplier of contributing to the electricity load. You turn it on and it stays on. It doesn't turn on and off. It doesn't respond to the peaks and the troughs in energy demand. So really that's one of the advantages, I suppose, that some people might see in nuclear, is that it can provide a large quantity of electricity. One of the negatives is you can't really take it and leave it with nuclear.
I don't know, we've spoken about this before, but at the moment I'm looking at doing a lot of my work in Scotland, where things are slightly different. As far as we know at the moment, there are not going to be any nuclear power stations built in Scotland, so we are looking at an energy mix which is very much more based on renewables. So that will be an interesting difference. It's nice to have the two different policies and different approaches to look at and to study.
With wind technology, is obviously we can't predict the weather, and I have sort of aware of a number of power surges. So why is that occurring, and what can we do with that? Or what are the ideas that are coming out? Obviously we don't have the answer.
We can look at power storage, obviously. We can look at pump storage, hydro power storage. We can look at battery storage in some cases. We can look at, as we've said, having an appropriate mix such that we're not dependent on one type of technology at any given moment in time.
Why is demand important in this equation?
Well, demand's important really because it's fundamental to the way that energy is purchased and produced. So if you have a nice, easy to predict demand across the country, then it's relatively easy to supply and fit that demand, as with any other product and service that you buy in a shop. The problem with energy is if people are constantly going to be relying on a consistent level of demand, that doesn't allow for weather variations and prediction changes to climate. So if you're able to understand a little bit more about how people respond to using energy into different situations, then you're better able to supply that demand.
Thank you. I think that gives us a nice introduction into some of the issues regarding power supply and demand. Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Anne. Thank you.